sometimes that extra study or that extra deep dive or that extra time spent in getting that hands-on experience, hands-on keyboard really can benefit you in this. And this is one of those sections where if you start building here, to Francois' point, the language of the internet is on Bash and automation builds from there. Like, this is one section where if you're going to do some more hands-on, it would really benefit you.
Hello and welcome to section 4 of our CCNA Automation Prep series. I'm Francois, he's Quinn, and today in section 4 we're going to talk about application deployment and security. So I'm taking a quick look at the blueprints for section 4. I see some Docker, some OWASP, some firewalls, some DevOps, a little bit all over the place. Quinn, how do you attack this section?
This one is near and dear to my heart because it doesn't seem, but to your point, it seems like it's all over the place, but there's a through line that runs through a lot of these things. We have things like Docker files, we have Docker images, we have looking at that CI/CD pipelines and things like that. And really what this all comes down to is when people say, learn Linux, or Linux is the language of the internet, it really goes back to Bash or the Bash shell. And so while it may seem a little bit difficult for someone who doesn't have that previous knowledge around like what these things look like, what they actually do, it helps if you can start studying these things and building that through line and where, Bash scripting or even just using like, CD and this and that and the other in the Linux shell. And then if you start playing with those, then you start seeing that Docker files are just Docker verbs with the Bash commands. And then you look at like CI/CD pipeline definitions, and they're just YAML wrap Bash. You start seeing these development of through lines. And so this is really, it all starts with Bash, then you kind of build from there. But, there's a lot of other stuff there. I don't know if there's anything that really stands out to you that is like something to hone in on in this one as well.
I'm looking at it the same way you are. I'm kind of lucky myself. I was a Linux guy before becoming a network engineer. I used Linux before my CCNA. But the reality is there's a lot of network engineers out there who went straight into networking, straight into their CCNA and beyond, coming from Windows and never having had exposure to Unix and Linux command line. And the reality is you can't really do automation without knowing the basics of, like you said, changing directory, touching a file, that sort of thing. The command line of automation, the place from which you run Python, is typically going to be Linux. So I know we're doubling down on this one and both saying the same thing. You got to get some hands-on on this. It's not really optional as a user of Python and all the automation tools like Ansible and all that, which mostly are going to run on Linux.
And the benefit is with this, it's like if we think about, okay, to your point, most of these or a lot of people came from Windows and using things like Hyperterminal or TerraTerm or PuTTY or SecureCRT on their Windows box. This section also touches on things around virtual machines, bare metal deployments, and containers. And the nice thing about this is if you don't have experience with the Linux shell, there's a variety of options that are out there. If you're running a Mac, you can use the terminal application, which is a ZSH, which is close enough to Bash that you can kind of muck around with. You can stand up a VM using a various hypervisor tools. If you're running Windows, there's a Windows subsystem for Linux. You can stand something up in the cloud. There's a lot of different options. And so by playing with these different virtualization technologies or application deployment technologies that some may use virtualization, you can get the hands-on with that as well. So you kind of see these through lines developing where you can build one piece on top of another and connect these disparate dots.
One thing that's obvious when you start looking at it is Docker and containers, they're just Linux construct, right? They're a feature, a lightweight segmentation feature of the Linux operating system. And the way you create Docker containers to run automation, and by the way, that we're still within the context of network automation, is with Docker files that are really Bash scripts. They're just sequence of Bash commands fundamentally. So I think that's the thread in making sense of this section, is building this layer approach. I mean, we think in terms of OSI layer and as network engineer, there is an application stack layer here. There's Linux, then there's built-in Docker files, there's VMs, and then there's orchestrating all this with CI/CD and DevOps practices, which is mentioned here. Bring all those pieces together to build a foundation on which you do automation. And a lot of this is just described here in this exam. This is a CCNA, not a CCNP, where this would be construct, for example. But the Bash is something you need hands-on. The rest of the stuff could be some self-study, for example.
Some of these things, what we speak to, especially when we say, hey, get hands on with this, some of these topics may be, to your point, they may be a describe or a compare and not a utilize or interpret or troubleshoot. But these things become so fundamental to what you need to do and how to build on top of it that sometimes that extra study or that extra deep dive or that extra time spent in getting that hands-on experience, hands-on keyboard really can benefit you in this. And this is one of those sections where, if I can sound like a broken record, this is one of those sections where if you start building here, to Francois's point, the language of the internet is on Bash, and everything and automation builds from there. Like, this is one section where if you're going to do some more hands-on, it would really benefit you. So, not to, like I said, not to sound like a broken record, but I think it's really valuable to be hands-on here. And then some of the other things that aren't there, that aren't part of that hands-on exploration, the load balancers and reverse proxies as an application deployment, or OWASP threats. Those are things where you can follow up with some study, because they are those described, but they're little outlier points in the section. The big thing there is building that connective tissue between all of these pieces and getting hands-on around those things.
There's an outlier we should call out. It's the constructed Python unit test.
Oh.
That is something that doesn't really fit in the rest of this story we've been looking at. It is a construct, so get some hands-on. Build yourself, or you use one of our labs for that. You are going to be testing hands-on on Python unit tests. And the way I tie it back with everything we've talked about is, if you are to build a CI/CD pipeline, which is in a more advanced stage, how you're going to be doing network automation at the end stages of that pipeline, you're going to need to test. So start getting comfortable with testing. It's part of network automation. It's not optional.
I think that really covers everything. It's Bash, it's unit tests, and then a little exploration on the side. But to the point that we want to hammer home on this one, find your own logic, build your own step, see how these things are interconnected, because they are all interconnected. But find your own way through that and start realizing how all those things are interconnected. And I think you'll have no problem with this domain. So, Francois, I appreciate everything here. We'll see everybody on the for domain 5.